Technology is playing an increasingly important role in enabling governments to meet their national security objectives. With innovation offering strategic security advantage, the challenge for agencies is ensuring they continue to access the latest technologies that are going to keep them in front. My name is Anuj Goel, Head of Technology for Macquarie Capital in Australia and New Zealand, and I'm delighted to be joined by Clayton Williams, MD of IQT International Australia, part of InQtel. InQtel's mission is to deliver the most sophisticated source of strategic technical knowledge and capabilities to the US government and its allies. Clayton is going to talk to us about that critical mission and share his perspectives on the technologies at the forefront of the national security agenda. Clayton, thanks for being here.
Great, thanks for having me.
I must say I'm really excited to have this conversation. It's really, it's going to be really good. So maybe let's just start with, if you tell us a bit about InQtel.
Sure, yeah. So InQtel was stood up in 1999 by the CIA, who realized that technology was kind of, innovation was shifting from government labs and large companies to these small startups in Silicon Valley. And so some really smart people got together and figured out a way to have a platform that allows the government to have access to and leverage and really benefit from all that innovation that was occurring. And so they formed InQtel in 1999. Since then, we've expanded to over 7 different agencies in the U.S. And then in 2019, we realized that we had been making a lot of international investments, and that innovation really wasn't exclusive to a small region of the earth in Silicon Valley, but that you really had to look broadly to find out where innovation was occurring. And so we stood up at the invitation of the UK and Australian governments our international office in London and in Sydney.
Great. Sydney, it's great to be here, to have you here. So in terms of how we think about sort of the impact that you're trying to make from your investing, can you tell us a little bit what the national security agenda's investments are and what you're trying to achieve?
Yeah. I think broadly we categorize it as deep tech, and that could be anything from a financial tracking company or perhaps a large 3D printer, right? And so our government needs solutions that go from very exotic and exciting to making sure that this package gets delivered on time, right? So we have broad investments across quantum, cybersecurity, fintech, obviously all the field tech that's out there, robotics, automation, to name a few.
Yeah, right. That's really exciting. And so how does that translate to sort of, what would be some of your success stories that have really helped our national security agencies really achieve their missions?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We have quite a few wins. Our portfolio now is about 500 companies together, announced and unannounced. And a lot of those wins, some of them they'll tell us and some of them we don't even know. But I think some of the most obvious ones are investments like GitLab or Anaconda that are really enabling tools to allow innovation to happen within these government environments. So if you imagine someone working on a secure system that has no access to tools and tradecraft that's out there on the World Wide Web, how do you make those available to them in a secure way? And really that it's interesting to hear from the company CEOs, because they say, well, thank you for putting us through this kind of rough diligence process to make sure that our stuff's secure, because now we can sell to large banks or to large industrial firms that have the same kind of requirements for safety and security.
Yeah, right. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. And so when you think about the startups you've invested in, how do you really help them with the government? So the government client, it's quite a large gap between a startup and a government agency.
Interesting question. And that's an important point, because if a company wants to become a government contractor, there's a lot of ways to do that, right? And I think we're better served to help companies that have a really great commercial product that has a dual use for a government purpose. And so if we just change 5% or add an extra layer of security, now it can be enabled for a government process. And that kind of helps two things. One, it doesn't take the commercial company off their roadmap. And then two, it allows the government to have a solution that they're not paying for every update. They're not paying for every new version that comes out. The commercial market's paying for that. So it's really beneficial to both parties. Where it becomes challenging is when those startups want to speak government, and when the government wants to put these kind of onerous tasks on a startup. And so our program helps kind of diffuse and simplify and streamline that process where we can actually help them engage without developing a full federal team, or over the course of a few months and years, we can help develop their sales team to market to a federal audience, and vice versa. A lot of these companies can't put together the kind of 60-page contract offering that an established defense contractor can. So we work with the government to be able to say, hey, why don't you try this and pilot it, and then see if you really can benefit from this without trying to put them through this onerous process.
Yeah, right. That makes a lot of sense. That's great, actually. And so when we think about, I was looking at some of the areas you invest in, and I really thought the sort of autonomous systems and Industry 4.0 were quite interesting. And I was thinking, how could that help your government clients?
Yeah. That's interesting.
Yeah.
In a post-COVID world, right? Those two topics really resonate because anything that can be done autonomously is obviously beneficial in kind of today's more recent world. And then we've seen kind of the disruption with logistics internationally. But the way we think of autonomous systems, and that could be anything from a satellite to an underwater robot, right? Anything that provides situational awareness, remote sensing, how to process on the edge, how to make decisions rapidly. Those are all things that can improve the safety of someone operating in the field. As all these sensors are kind of ubiquitous and collecting digital dust on all of us, it lets you know what kind of risks you're posing by walking down the street, for example. And on the Industry 4.0 side, it's really interesting. I think, especially in Australia, you see this kind of, can we manufacture things here? Can we create things here? And I think that's a really important capability for a nation to have. And so investments in 3D printing, in logistics streamlining, ensuring that the package you created here is the package that was delivered there is all critical things for our government customers.
Yeah, right. That's really good. And I guess looking even further ahead then, how do you think about what's sort of horizon style sort of areas, sectors that Starlab should be thinking about that governments will need in the future and would be focus areas?
Yeah. I think there's certainly some really interesting, groundbreaking stuff like quantum technology that it, when it becomes more available and more regularly used, has a profound impact on security, and being able to rapidly handle that kind of an environment is something that our government's customers certainly care about in our kind of constantly asking for what's the latest, because it's moving so fast and so small, right? So it's interesting to try to keep up with that and make sure that we're informing them as best we can as to the opportunities and the threats posed by these kind of groundbreaking technologies. I think robotics is the same way. It's one thing to have your joystick and your drone flying around, but now you see companies like Emerson here are able to navigate inside a building and provide autonomous flight to map an indoor environment. And so there's a lot of interesting plays where a platform's becoming multi-purpose and multi-use. And so being able to understand kind of the operating environments that are expanding and what that means is important.
Makes sense. So a bit about you. So you moved here from the US, clearly.
Yeah.
And so how are you thinking about Incutel in Australia and what you're looking to achieve down here?
Yeah. Australia is really a great place for innovation, and we're really excited to, especially in the deep tech environment, some really great companies. Advanced Navigation is an early investment we made here. That kind of is the brains behind all the positioning for all those autonomous systems I was talking about. A lot of deep tech that's really world class. And so supporting those companies, making sure that the Australian government here is leveraging those companies, and then making sure that that technology makes it over I guess the larger pond and to the UK as well, to make sure that if there is really innovative technology that we're all making use of it. And what's interesting about that as well is it's also bringing together these companies, or not companies, these countries, to really think about innovation together, right? And so that's been a really interesting aspect of being here on the ground is making sure that you can make those connections and that everyone's in the conversation.
Okay. And how do you think about sort of the tech talent you're seeing in Australia versus sort of what might be there in the valley? What?
Yeah,
what's your view on
yeah,
that?
yeah. It's interesting. I was actually just talking with the CEO of Primer, who's actually moved to Australia during the COVID times. So I think the main takeaway is that innovation happens everywhere, and there's certainly world-class talent here. Really strong university systems, really strong government support of deep tech, and really a culture that's ready to take it in and use it, right? And so I think when it comes to Australia, one of the kind of recurring themes that we're hearing is really how to compete when there's just less people, right? And so you have the same area masses to cover, the same challenges that a larger physical country like the United States has. And that's where the things like automation and being able to make decisions with less human in the loop operation really become critical for Australia.
Yeah, like as you think like how do you control the borders and all that sort of.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The same border to monitor. Oh, actually, I think even worse. I mean, how do you do that? So there's all sorts of remote sensing. There's autonomous platforms. There's any number of analysis that has to happen after you get all the data in on a computer sitting in a box somewhere. So that whole process is a real challenge for Australia, and I think a lot of innovation is happening to solve those problems.
Right. And as you think about in making investments in Australia, what are you looking for in terms of what's your criteria, or if I was a tech startup, when should I come talk to In-Q-Tel?
Yeah. I think tech differentiation is really what we're after. So I think we talked about drones earlier. So when you're talking about a drone platform, there's a lot of companies that can offer a drone delivery, but what about the company that can do package pickup, right? So all the different things that are kind of missing pieces to a we call a CONOP, but basically an end-to-end mission, right? And so finding the gaps and filling up those gaps with innovation is really, I think, the key to In-Q-Tel and what we really bring to the table. That because a lot of these startups, they can't, there's no startup doing a new S16, right? But there's some really interesting components that if we could integrate into those systems would be critical for the governments that we support. And so that's really what we're looking for is kind of this really innovative technology that we can leverage into larger systems.
Yeah, and so that'd be really interesting because I think there is quite a bit in here, and I think South Australia and other markets have a lot of that sort of industry. So okay, and when you think about sort of what In-Q-Tel does, it was really interesting to me that In-Q-Tel is a not-for-profit and at the same time as a VC. So how do you think about that balance?
Yeah. That's a question we get often. And I think there's a really good reason for why we are a nonprofit organization. And really that's because our government customers really wanted to ensure that we are motivated by mission, right? And so a lot of the other venture capital investors are motivated by profit, right? And when you're sitting in a board meeting, they actually have a fiduciary responsibility for profit, right, of the company. And so we have a different focus, right? Ours is focusing on maximizing impact with our government customers. So that's what we get graded on by what we call pilots and adoptions of technology. And that's our sole focus is to ensure that the company is successful, but also successful in their delivery of products to the three governments that we support. And so I think that actually, I think, is really compelling to a lot of the startups that we talk to, because that's just an interesting, refreshing voice, I think, in the boardroom to have, right? And I think the government customers really appreciate that we can have those conversations in those boardrooms that with government contracting you just legally cannot do. So the nonprofit, while it sounds a little odd, and of course, when we do make money on our investments, we can roll that into earlier stage companies that maybe don't have a product ready, but it's a really great idea. But if you wait too long, they're already worth $300 million, and you can't write a check that large. So we make really good use of our funding, and nonprofit organization.
That's excellent. Well, thank you so much for your time today.
Sure.
It's been really interesting, and hopefully we can see you making some more investments down here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Thanks.